Hello YouTube, I'm the Atheist Guard, and I want to do a quick video on the irrational arguments of the NRA, the pro-gun people, which we've seen escalate after the recent shooting. Again, another shooting. So the conversation comes up, people are talking about it, the students are getting involved, pushing for reform and change. And of course that means the gun lobby has an interest in protecting itself and has to put out these irrational arguments defending doing nothing, basically. And that to me is appalling. It's disgusting that their position is basically not to do anything. Or what they propose is often nonsensical. In any case, I have a meme, which I'm sure some of you might have actually seen, circulating on the internet. I saw this on my Facebook page, and it's basically structured like a syllogism, but of course we know they're not capable of actual, valid and sound syllogisms. But nonetheless, I'm going to go through this line by line. And the first line, of course, it says, murder is illegal. Attempting murder is illegal. A felon owning a gun is illegal. So it's got these three things at the very beginning that are true. I mean, yeah, we have a law against those things. But it doesn't change the fact that murder is easier with a high-capacity firearm. It just is. I mean, yeah, you could rent a truck and mow some people down, but they all got to be pretty much concentrated in a small spot, and then you have to drive into them, and some of them are going to survive with bad injuries, but survive nonetheless. Whereas with an AR-type rifle, you can shoot up to 300 yards in any direction, up to 30 people with that 30-round magazine. So, I mean, they can be more widely spaced. You can pick and choose your targets. You can kill them efficiently. So murder is illegal and a lot easier to do with firearms. And a lot easier in a culture that places the right to have a firearm over the safety of its constituents. And that's pretty much the U.S. in a nutshell. Attempting murder is illegal. Yeah, that's true. If you even attempt to kill somebody, it's illegal. But how many attempts to kill somebody with a firearm don't actually succeed? Firearms are very efficient at killing. That's why we use them to kill. That's why the military and the police have them. That's why people have them for self-defense, because they're efficient. You don't have to attempt to kill somebody. If you hit them with your round, they're likely going to die. That's why we use them. They're efficient. A felon owning a gun is illegal. True. Absolutely moot to the topic, though, because in these mass shootings, I can't think of any of them that were actual felons and actually owned their weapon illegally. As a matter of fact, I would say the vast majority of them owned their weapons legally. They obtained them legally. They went through a background check system and bought their weapons legally. It's just easy to get weapons like this in America. It just is. Even if you're mentally unstable, even if people know you're mentally unstable, even if you've been adjudicated mentally unstable, all you gotta do is check that no box on your background check form that says, no, I'm not crazy. And that's the extent to which mental health services is integrated in our background check system. It really is. The information does not typically get saved to your profile somewhere. It's just you got a criminal background check, and then there's this paper that you check little yes and no boxes on. It's like, are you a terrorist? No, I'm not a terrorist. You're actually telling them what you are instead of them finding out what you are. Which kind of defeats the purpose of a background check system. That's one of the big reasons this stuff isn't working in America. So shooting people indiscriminately is illegal. Well, yeah, but it's also really easy to do in a culture steeped, that has guns everywhere, millions of guns, more guns than people. It's easy for a crazy person to get their hands on a gun. And this is a cultural thing. This is something that's going to have to change at a cultural level, that Americans are going to have to realize that we don't have to have all these guns. And if guns are rare, as they are in other countries, these things don't happen as much, if at all. And that's what we see in places like Europe, where their statistics for, firearm-related homicides are way lower than ours. People just don't, they're not obsessed with guns. They don't have tons of guns in those countries. And lo and behold, people aren't dying by firearms as often. Using firearms in a criminal manner is illegal. That's a tautology. It's neither here nor there. Of course it's illegal if it's a criminal manner that it's being... See, this is just some of the... It's sophistry at some point, and it's also just nonsensical talk. Criminals do not go through background checks when purchasing illegal guns. Yeah, they do. Are you able to predict the future to know that someone buying a gun legally is going to be a criminal? And that these people that become criminals who bought their firearms legally don't exist? That's completely ass backwards. If you're not a criminal, you can go buy a gun. Very little is done to check on you. Your mental health isn't taken into account. You don't have to have a psych evaluation like you do in some countries to have a firearm. There's no wait time in most states to get a firearm other than the 30 minutes it takes to do the background check. So if you're planning to do crime with a firearm and you don't have a record, you are a criminal because you're intending to do something criminal. But you can still get the gun as long as it's not on your background yet, or as long as the background check system hasn't been updated with your recent crimes, which could be the case as well. It takes time for your crimes to filter into that system so that when they do run your background check, they can say, oh yeah, this guy's a criminal, we can't get him a gun. You could have murdered somebody the day before with a firearm, and have a charge against you and all this stuff, and if for some reason you're out walking around, which I don't know why you would be, but with plea bargaining and things like that, people get out on bail for gun-related crimes. I mean, you could go out and do some more crime, even though you technically are a criminal already, and you could actually go and get a firearm and probably won't have a problem with that background check system because it doesn't update fast. It is very poorly done. It says, explain how criminals will follow new laws, and explain how new laws will make us safer. Explain how restricting law-abiding citizens even more will make us safer. Oh, you can't, therefore your argument is invalid. Well, first of all, that's completely false. If I can't explain something, it doesn't make my argument invalid. It just means the answer is eluding us, that we haven't thought hard enough about it. The argument may still be valid, but a lack of an explanation doesn't make it invalid. That's an argument from ignorance. It's a fallacy. It's a logical fallacy. Criminals don't follow law because they're criminals. But you can have a criminal in culture A, where guns are extremely rare, and a criminal in culture B, where guns are friggin' everywhere and easy to get your hands on. And guess which one's going to be shooting people more? I mean, they don't have to follow the laws. We're not talking about laws in that sense. We're talking about restrictions. We're talking about making it harder for people to obtain a firearm. That we should hold a higher bar for the possession of a firearm. There should be a higher metric that you have to achieve to be trusted with a firearm, just like we do for driving cars. We don't just let everybody drive a car. You gotta show your competency behind the wheel, take a test. You gotta take a written test showing that you know what the signs are and everything. You gotta be a certain age to drive a car. You have to have insurance. You should have insurance, and if you don't, you got to pay the DMV for your lack of insurance, basically. It's like $400 a year or something, and then you run the risk of getting sued if you ever get in an accident. But we have all these restrictions in place for driving, and yet none of that happens. None of it when it comes to firearms. You don't have a criminal record? Okay, here's a gun. You don't have to show that you're competent, that you have a safe way of keeping the firearm, that you've passed a psych evaluation, that you know the safety of a firearm, that you can There should be a test that you take that shows you know firearm safety. That you have an intent, that you intend to store it in a safe way. In Germany, they verify randomly that you are storing your firearms in a safe way. And if you think about it, in a lot of these shootings, it's a kid getting their hands on their parents' firearm. That should be impossible. Who are these idiot parents that have their firearms so easily obtainable by their kids? They're deranged kids. And if they know their kid's deranged, why would you even risk having a firearm in the household? If I knew that I was losing my mind, I was starting to experience the early onset of dementia, I'd probably get rid of my guns because I don't want to risk me completely going nuts, like the guy in Nevada, Las Vegas, and to just shoot up everybody. One day I'm a nice, good citizen, no record, no criminal record at all. And the next minute I flip and I'm shooting people up. If I can detect that ahead of time, I'm not going to keep a firearm. But of course, there's no requisite for any of that in this country. I mean, it's just ridiculously stupid how it's handled in America. It's just stupid. There isn't enough going on to make sure that the people who do get to have guns should have guns. Instead, they rely on the Second Amendment. It says you're allowed to have a gun, that your rights can't be infringed, that it's because of a militia, that a militia is required to maintain the safety and security of a free nation, that the people should have the right to bear arms in an uninfringed way. You restrict the militia, making sure they're well regulated, and you don't restrict the people so that the balance is in favor of the people. I get that. I've defended the Second Amendment. I understand why it was created. But at some point we got to realize this is not healthy for society. It's just an amendment. It's an amendment. It's not a fundamental right. They call it one of our rights because it's in the Bill of Rights, but it's just an amendment. We don't have to have that. We can say, you know what, even though a well-regulated militia is required for the safety of our country, that could eventually turn on us potentially, the right of the people to bear arms should be something we have, but it should be well-regulated too. Because not regulating firearm ownership is stupid. It's just bad. It's a bad idea. And the stats show it. You go to the FBI website, look at the stats for all these countries, and guess what? America sucks at it. In the civilized world, looking at European countries, Canada, Australia even, our numbers are terrible. Now, why is that? What is the common denominator with all these other countries that makes their stats so much better, so much more reasonable, that their gun-related homicide rates are so much lower? What is that common denominator? I don't even know. I'm not even sure I understand what it is that these countries are doing right that actually has an effect. I'm not a sociologist. I'm not a criminologist. We need to get our experts on this to figure out what is actually working in these countries, because there are some stupid laws in these countries too. Some stupid regulations that make no freaking sense. And I have a video up that explains some of these really bad ideas. Like Canada, you can't have an AK-47, but you can have a VZ-58. And they shoot the exact same round, have the exact same capacity. The VZ-58 is actually arguably more accurate. But one's illegal because it's the AK-47, and one's legal because nobody thought of it. They ban things based on model numbers instead of based on features. And then you get things like, politicians proposing to ban things based on features that don't even have an effect on the deadly nature of the weapon. And thus you get rifles in California that go around the feature laws, so that, it looks a lot different than a normal AR, but it's still a freaking AR, shooting the same exact round, and you can still put the same magazine in it if you want to. Now, technically there's a magazine size restriction out there, but a criminal's not going to bother with that. But they can at least buy an AR. It'll just have a funky looking buttstock that connects to the handle instead of to the top of the firearm so that it gets around that, oh, the buttstock can't be military style. It's got to be... It's stupid. They have bad ideas out there. There are bad ideas for gun control. But there has to be something that is working in these other countries. And it's our job to figure out what that is. And I think I have an idea of what it might be. First of all, national level. Not 50 individual states with their own variety of gun law, gun restrictions. I mean, that creates a black market. When you have strict states right next to non-strict states, guess what happens? The criminals go to the non-strict state. Or the guns flow from the non-strict state into the strict state, and that's how they get their firearms in the black market. The firearms are still there. They're just weighted different depending on which state you're in. That's stupid. If you have a national level where this is the agreed upon standard, firearms become more rare and harder to get. I mean, if you wanted to go to France and see how quickly you can find any type of assault rifle, I would say you'd probably have a hard time doing it. But say you lived in California or New York City and you want to get an assault rifle, you just got to drive a couple hundred miles. You know? Or have someone buy it for you. Because they're not concerned. The people that sell these firearms aren't concerned with selling them to responsible individuals. They just want to make the money. So if someone buys a firearm that they are intending to just give to someone else or sell to someone else who might have a criminal record or might be crazy, the gun sellers don't know that. They have no way of knowing that. They're going to run the background check, as flawed as it is, on the guy buying it in front of them. And he can sell that to someone else. Straw purchase it, where you buy from someone else who they're the ones that are evaluated. So a national level of gun regulation has to be done. It has to be strict. 2, we should have stricter penalties for gun crimes. It should be ridiculously strict. If you violate this social contract to the extent that you're using a gun in a crime, you shouldn't be able to plea bargain your way out of that, get out on bail, be on the street the next day. You should be like mandatory, no bail, you're stuck in prison, and the time that the judge is going to give you is going to be something pretty extreme, like 8 years, 10 years, even if you didn't end up killing somebody. If you used a gun in the commission of crime, you should be stuck in jail. No getting out on parole early for good behavior. You had bad behavior, you stay in jail. And you see that in a lot of countries. Like even South Africa has better gun stats than we do, as far as firearm homicide rate per 100K. Even they have it. Because if you do a crime in South Africa with a gun, you are screwed. You are really, really screwed. And those that do have firearms in South Africa have to demonstrate the competency, they have to maintain their license, they have to continually be tested, I think it's every 2 years or something like that, just to maintain their right to keep that firearm, because they don't want idiots with firearms. It's a no-brainer. They didn't have to ban firearms, they just said they don't want people in society to have a firearm who don't know how to use it, how to keep it, how to be safe with it. And they have an extremely extensive background check system as well. So what's the problem with that? I don't understand why this can't be done here. Why we can't just say, you know what, enough's enough. Let's make gun crimes extremely costly for the criminal. That's how you address the criminal side of the equation. They're not going to follow the laws because they're intending to do a crime. But you can make sure that when they break the law, they're not back on the street the very next day. That's what you need to do. You need to make it such that doing a gun crime isn't no big deal. So, national level regulations, higher penalties for gun crimes, and then there's the cultural element of just getting away from the addiction to guns. Getting out of this conspiracy mindset that, oh my God, tyranny's gonna happen, we better get that ready, make sure we got our AR so that if the government comes kicking down the door, Nazi style, we can defend ourselves from tyranny. We have a military for that. I served in the military. The oath was that we're protecting the people. from all threats, foreign and domestic. It doesn't matter. Your military is who's going to keep tyranny from happening. What are you going to do against a tank with a firearm? What are you going to do against an Apache helicopter? If some weird, I can't even think of how this scenario would happen, where there's a military trying to be tyrannical on the American people. What are you going to do with that AR-15 that only shoots one round every time you pull the trigger? That semi-automatic AR-15. Even if you had a fully automatic AR-15, what are you going to do? That's not going to do a damn thing. But we have a military that protects the people, that protects the Constitution, that upholds the Constitution, that will, in fact, overthrow a dictator if that should happen in our government. That will, in fact, there be a coup very quickly if the government went off the rails and decided to be oppressive to the entire country or something like that. That's what the military does. And they're the only ones who can do that. They're the only ones who can respond to a military threat. Because they're a military. Now, personal self-defense? Yeah. But why do you need a gun in the first place for personal self-defense? Because there's a crap ton of guns out there. Because we're addicted to guns. Because we've got millions and millions of guns in this country. And people perceive that as a viable threat. Now, if you look at the actual odds of you ever getting in a conflict, it's pretty low. But better to have it, not need it, than need it and not have it, right? But you don't see people walking around with lightning rods wearing Faraday cage uniforms to compensate for that lightning strike odd that might happen to them. It's better to have that lightning rod than not have it, right? It's just bad arguments. It's illogical. Anyways, I see my camera's about to die. Just think about it. Look at the bad arguments. Figure out what works elsewhere. That's all we got to do. We got to do something. And all these arguments are basically saying, let's do nothing about it. This is the new normal for the USA. Students getting shot up is a new normal that they're completely okay with. Let's arm the teachers. Yeah, that makes sense. Instead of decreasing gun popularity and the proliferation of guns in our society, let's just put more guns into the equation. Because after all, if the guy with a gun stops a bad guy with a gun, except when it doesn't, and the cop's standing outside and doesn't enter in to actually engage the shooter. There's flaws to all these arguments they make. Think about it. Think about it.